Welcome to another AI debate podcast. We have Jeff Wallace with us to take the pro AI side today, co-founder of Silicon Valley in your pocket. I'm Charles Cormier. I run a bunch of AI apps and startups, so it'll be a pretty fun one. I think the precise question, Jeff, that I sent you was, or we could take it that way, was like, would 30% of the job market be slashed in less than 5 years? I think that was the question. Would you say yes or no to that one?
I would say the jobs that many of us, maybe even a higher percentage than that, are doing will be different in that time frame. I don't know if jobs disappear. I think the onus is on businesses, government, universities, et cetera, institutions to educate people to use and know how to best engage the tools that are out of the, as I would say, the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? These AI tools are here. They're not going away. You're not going to be able to tell people don't engage and use them. What I think we need to do is educate people on how best to engage and utilize these tools to our collective advantage. So right. I don't know if the jobs will go away, but I think they'll be different for sure.
I think certainly they will go away, but an even better question is, do you think that like most of these jobs or the people that would lose these jobs, they would not recuperate from that and they would be, quote unquote, be rendered obsolete?
I think there will be many jobs that can and will be rendered obsolete, but I think, again, goes back to reskilling. I think people, either themselves or the institutions that they're part of, need to find ways to teach people how to use these tools, because, it's similar to an education debate. For me, there's been debate in the political realms as to whether or not we should give away university education to people. That's a very, very costly endeavor, but it's a really simple one for me. I view it as the country that's going to win in the long term is the country that has the most educated and most productive workforce. And so if we price education out of the reach of many, then we will not win that battle. And so AI is similar. If we don't re-engage and re-educate and reskill our workforce to use these tools that are here and never going away, they're only going to be more and more such tools, then we lose the game in the long term. So I feel like we just need to constantly stay on top of reskilling and rethinking about where can human beings interact and engage with AI so that there's a kind of a 1 and 1 is 3 kind of situation.
Right. And the skilled worker, do you feel that there's also a strong percentage that comes from immigration nowadays? And do you feel that the current administration is doing well into importing tip-top talents in the US?
I am based out of Silicon Valley, right? So to me, Silicon Valley is a very good representation of why we need more immigration. And you could get into levels of skilled or unskilled. Of course, we want, we as a country, we need both, right? We need people to do the lesser skilled required jobs, and a lot of Americans simply don't want to do, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a judgment statement. So I'm a massive proponent of immigration, and I think the more the merrier. I think we have to find ways to, involve people on a legal basis through immigration. But I am a huge, huge proponent of immigration. In fact, 52%, so more than half of the tech companies in Silicon Valley are founded or led by immigrants to the US, right? So to say that we should stop immigration, there's too many people coming in, it's like, it's crazy to me. I mean, look at the performance of the immigrants that generally are coming into this country. I would have a hard time anybody trying to convince me it's not on net, a huge positive for us. So I'm a big proponent of immigration. I think we should inspire more immigration. We should welcome people with high skills. We should welcome people with other skills that are maybe not as high skilled, but that are performing jobs that we still need here done in America.
Right. And coming back to the job question, don't you think that government regulation / more like socialist policies would actually over-regulate AI and preventing it from taking over? And two, don't you think also that like the human nature of humans being to always push things back until tomorrow and not adapt, don't you think that this would drastically slow down the AI revolution and keep the market in stasis or in low growth as it is right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, an interesting topic. I am a believer in a balanced regulation. And what I mean by that is let's put parameters around the safety. Like we don't want, weapons, for example. We don't want everybody to be able to walk around with whatever weapon they want. That's not what our Second Amendment is about. I wouldn't want everybody to be able to walk around with whatever they want openly and just do it. So we put some regulations around what does it mean to have a Second Amendment and still allow people, certain freedoms, but within boundaries. I think AI is the exact same thing. I think we have to put boundaries around where AI, we want to maintain control. We don't want it to get out of control on ourselves. But I would allow as much freedom within that boundary as possible. I would call it kind of freedom within a framework would be a phrase I use to describe things like this, where you set the sandbox boundaries, but you let the play inside the sandbox take whatever shape it takes. And I think we need innovators to innovate. And when you start putting restrictions around innovation, I think you just stifle innovation. So yeah, I'm a proponent of less regulation, but not no regulation. If I would go that far.
And do you think the $500 billion government investment in Stargate will be a net positive, or is it better to go the Silicon Valley way and go private, or is it the arms race type of scenario in which we need to obviously win over another country?
Yeah, I think it's an all hands on deck. So to me, I don't see it as a choice between the 500 billion that the government is going to support plus the private money. I don't think, private money is going to go away. I think private money is going to continue to innovate the way private entities do. And I think the government should be supportive. The one thing I've often said, it relates to like startup investment too, with respect to governments. I'm not a proponent of governments investing in startups. A startup comes to do a government program, says, I have a startup, and they give them 50 or 100,000 USD and say, good luck, go build your business. I'm not a proponent of that. I am a proponent of government if they have money that they wish to invest, partnering with private investors who actually know how to determine and vet what is worth receiving an investment. Not every startup deserves investment, right? Similarly with AI, I'm happy if the government wants to bring massive amount of financial resource to the table. But I think it needs to be more of a public-private partnership where they work in tandem with each other rather than one or the other.
Right. What's your take on basically people not using AI at all and really doubling down on their human intellect? Is that something you can still do nowadays, or that makes you like an old Homo erectus, not used to using useful technology?
Yeah, I definitely am a believer that every company needs to understand these tools and figure out for themselves how they can play together with these tools. I don't think waiting for the dust to settle or, no, we can have our people do this. I don't think that's a long-term viable strategy. So for me, it's always going to go back to embrace the tools that are here today, figure out how they can impact you. We run programming at Silicon Valley in Your Pocket and our sister program called The Battery. It's called Pragmatic AI. It's helping companies and founders figure out what can AI do to it and what are the implications of AI against them, like in a competitive sense, if you don't embrace it. So I definitely think people need to understand that and not just take this anti-tech or anti-AI type stance.
Right, because the argument of these people would be that they don't want to outsource their intelligence, but is it like someone not trying to use a calculator type of thing? Is it that intelligence actually evolves from these new tools and we're getting into new sorts of intelligences? And can you describe these new sorts of intelligences, aka upskilling when it comes to prompting, when it comes to conversing with an AI and understanding how it replies?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked this question this way, because I do feel like teaching people how to write proper prompts to get the best output out of an AI tool is really a critical skill that people should be embracing and learning. And hopefully people come at this with a growth mindset, not a closed mindset of, oh, I don't need AI, I can do these things. At the end of the day, people are going to either outcompete their competitors or be outcompeted by their competitors. And I feel like those that will win in the long term will be the ones that embrace the technologies and figure out how best to leverage them. So teaching prompt engineering, teaching workflow automation. There are some amazing tools that have emerged into the market in the last couple of years that I think everyone should figure out how and in what are the best ways for them to leverage those tools. I don't need to bring my intelligence if an AI can make my intelligence, can equate my intelligence. So I then have to think, well, what now can I add if AI has taken on what I used to do, whether I'm in a marketing role or a copywriting role or a coding role? What can I now do now that the AI can do what I used to do? That's a question in the growth mindset that I think people need to approach AI and other innovations with. But AI is kind of in a little bit of a class of its own, I would say, relative to other innovations.
Do you think that most corporations will benefit from AI? Do you think the corporation is a scalable model in 20 to 30 years from now, when any solo founder can almost instantly build a profitable business?
Yeah, I still think corporations will have a huge role in our society, in our economy. But I do think we will find, companies that can emerge much faster with much lower costs. Think about cloud. There's a little bit of an analogy to the cloud, right? Corporations say, "Oh, I don't want cloud. I don't want my data at risk. I'm not putting it into cloud. Everything needs to be on-prem." That was an argument. Good luck finding a company now that doesn't have cloud, right? There's no chance you're going to find a major company that doesn't touch the cloud somewhere. And I feel like AI is going to be the same. People will resist this innovation at first. They'll be very concerned about the security, which is a fair concern, by the way. I'm not trying to diminish it. And then they'll figure out how to put those proper boundaries that I talked about earlier so that they feel secure enough to dip their toes into the AI waters and then ultimately go a little deeper into the pool, if you will. So I think corporations will have a role. I think these comfort levels will emerge similarly to mobile technology. I was at the helm of the mobile era of technology into the enterprise, and there was massive concern about iPhones and Android type phones coming into an enterprise. They all wanted BlackBerry because BlackBerry was the secure platform. Where's BlackBerry today? Where's Google and iOS today? That's where cloud went. That's where mobile went. I absolutely fundamentally believe AI will have a similar track where we'll have a lot of concerns in the beginning. People start to dip their toes, realize the opportunities and benefits that AI affords them. They'll put the proper security blankets around them as best as possible, and people will embrace it. 5 years from now, every company will be using AI. They won't even think about not having had AI anymore in their history.
Well, I think corporations also have characteristics that are not aligned with the AI future. A bunch of employees, right? I think it will come down to 0 employees and 10,000 AI agent at some point, and maybe 5 execs, which would make them less investable. It wouldn't diminish their coffins, but we're also seeing cryptocurrency come up and all these new innovations. Not saying money would go to 0, but employees could just start boycotting the company because they've been fired, and then that could create some kind of shitstorm. So I do think that in the future there would be less mega corporations. I mean, the nature of power is that some people try to handle and grip onto the power pretty much forever. That's what is a corporation. It's like a group of human beings trying to get massive powers and massive results, massive money and massive influence in the market. But I think that the future is leaner, and I think that investor might want to favor pre-seed investments rather than gigantic company. And last but not least, I think corporations do a poor job at innovating. They just have like a Coca-Cola product and it stays the same for 30 years. And the cherry flavor is called an innovation, while a startup could come up with a new and way better Coca-Cola, healthy one from one day to the other. So I'm seeing like less scalability on the corporate model side of things. Do you agree?
It is interesting. I can't necessarily refute your argument completely, but I would say that, I don't see Apple laying off, tens of thousands of employees, or Google. There may be some targeted layoffs in some of these companies, but we're not seeing mass exodus.
But Apple is performing so bad, you just compare Siri with ChatGPT or Anthropic that was created in 3 months.
Yeah.
literally, and is worth 20 billion now. So you
Yeah.
compared like the time to value, and I'm just thinking like, what is Apple holding on to? It's like shitloads of money and a gerontocracy of investors. And I'm not bullish on Apple. I'm not bullish on Google anymore for these reasons.
Interesting. I'm a happy tech shareholder in lots of the big seven, if you will, the FANG companies they used to call
Yeah.
it. It's expanded a little bit at the hardware level with the companies like NVIDIA. At the chipset level, the DeepSeek thing didn't shake my confidence that
No,
NVIDIA is
that
a good company
was
in the long term. That was a blip. That was a buy
yeah,
opportunity. In fact, when it blipped, I did buy.
nice.
So
Good move.
I'm not as concerned about the longer term future of Apple or Google. I still think these companies are going to lead the way. I think we'll see some consolidation potentially, in fact, where they might buy. Look at the investments that have gone into OpenAI from Microsoft or Anthropic from Amazon, right? We're seeing mega billions of dollars of investment from the older stalwarts in the FANG kind of level of tech companies into the new emerging ones. And I think we'll continue to see that. I think we'll see closer collaborations between these innovators and these bigger companies. The bigger companies have massive resources and massive audiences, not just the resources. So yeah, I do think innovations are happening faster. I do think you require less. It's like being a startup founder 20 years ago versus now. What a massive difference. All the things that are available to us at almost zero cost, relatively speaking, today, that cost us high 6-7 figures 20 years ago. So I think we'll continue. AI is going to accelerate. It's like fuel on that fire of reducing costs to get an initiative, an innovation to market. So I feel like you're correct, but I feel like these two things live in coexistence. They don't necessarily, it's not mutually exclusive in my sense.
Right. Imagine being in front of a king 300 years ago or 500 years ago and answering all their questions with ChatGPT in your hands. That, I mean, how much would they pay you? Right? They're like, you're a friggin' magician.
You'd be a wizard. Yeah, you'd be the wizard.
Yeah,
Right?
way more than the Google example or the smartphone example. I think AI is just another beast altogether. Do you think it's bigger than all these latest revolution and including the internet revolution?
Yeah, you know what? I describe to founders that I work with and others, but mostly in our programs, I work with a lot of founders, and I describe to them that there's been 4 what I call tectonic tech shifts in my life. There was the emergence of the PC. That started a real revolution, right? Then you go down about 10 years later, 14 years later, or somewhere in that time frame, and you have the internet.
Yeah.
And that was a huge, unbelievable thing. And then you go about 13 years later from that, you now have the emergence of iOS and Android phones, mobile technology, laying that computer
Apps.
in your hands. And apps, right? That whole app economy. And now here we are again, call it 18 years after the birth of the iPhone and Android era into the AI era. So I do feel like we have that. I'm kind of not young anymore, and I've seen 4 of these massive shifts in my journey. I do think AI is of that level. I think it's bigger than that level.
Right.
So yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm curious to see what's going to come in 15 years, from now.
Right, which is my next question. Do you feel like Moore's law is following its course of action, and what is the next big thing? If not AI, I mean, my brain's limited.
Yeah.
I mean, Neuralink, right? Like Neuralink would be pretty
Neuralink, I
logic.
think the combination of AI and robotics, right, where we actually start to create very
Yeah, that would be crazy.
sentient robots, right? Like that's going to happen. We're seeing driverless cars now. I often also describe that, the science fiction that I grew up watching as a kid is the world I'm living today.
Yes,
and that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing, because if you look at the science fiction of today and see what it's forecasting out for, say, 15, 20, 30 years away from now, it's just mind-boggling to me. So I do think we're going to see some very significant advancements based on the kind of networks that we are having. We're able to do more and more. Think about the difference in our internet now versus, again, 20, 30 years ago. Think, where is it going to be in 20 or 30 years from now? Combine that with AI, combine that with robotics, combine that with computer vision. It's really mind-boggling to envision where the future is taking us.
Yeah, robotics would be a complete game changer for the world because yeah, you could have the $1,000 house, for example. You could fix a bunch of social problem, and yeah, the more work and energy is outputted out there, the more we can fix problems. And some jobs are super dangerous, right? And zap your energy, they can injure you. So it would be a total revolution. I had a bunch of questions, but let me start with do you think that super intelligence will only be available by definition to a couple of few mega corporation, or do you think it's something that will be more open source?
Well, I mean, look at OpenAI. They started as an open source, and now they're moving towards the privatization, right? They're trying to go more for
But it's
profit.
still $15 or $19 per month, which
It's
is very
very accessible for sure. But I think superintelligence ultimately will be mass available. I don't think it'll be contained. Will it be controlled by a handful? Probably. I would say the answer is probably. Look at our major tech companies now, right? You can name on, you don't need all 10 fingers to name the companies that control 80, 90% of what the vast majority of us are living, whether it's on mobile or internet or what have you. So I would say it's going to probably follow a similar suit.
Right, and we're not aware of that control because they just don't cut it, right? And somewhat in safe hands, we would like to think. But like, if one day they're unhappy, who knows if they can cut us out now? What kind of innovation would that bring? Would someone take over pretty quick? I think so. But let me ask you that question: if you would have super intelligence in your hands, would you make it public? I think I would because I'd be just scared, and it would be like too much to handle by myself.
Too much
I'd like to
responsibility.
outsource responsibility to my fellow humans.
I am with you. I think it should be mass available. I think it should not be controlled. I think we're kind of seeing in the political realm a little bit right now, what happens when power exceeds, ego exceeds power. And when ego and power are combined, it gets dangerous. So I'm not a fan of consolidating that much power in the hands of individual companies or individual, even at this point, political administrations. I think it needs to be more broadly available. I think ultimately there's always going to be, I'll call them freedom fighters, like people rogue fighting someone trying to control things. And so there'll always be resistance of some sort. But if it were me, to your question, I would absolutely open source things like that and make them very readily available.
Right, but like these few at the top, I mean, democracy elected that, which sometimes makes me doubt of democracy itself. But I don't think necessarily it's democracy. It's like reshaping it and bringing a tech layer on democracy so that everyone can have a voice at the table and a voice, right? Like if I'm way more knowledgeable than you on that topic, I should have more weight. I think at the end of the day, how would you reshape democracy in the right direction?
I think to an extent, democracy has brought us to where we are today, but I also think it's being manipulated. So yes, I'm not sure a pure democratic approach. I often joke with respect to political elections, what do you call the person who has received the most votes? And I would normally say the winner, unless you're in the United States. That's not the way it works in the US, right? And that's not necessarily a good thing. So
not just in the US,
me, I actually think
asterisks everywhere.
Asterisks everywhere, and that's not pure democracy. To me, one vote, one person, one vote. That's pure democracy. So I don't think we're living that at the moment in the United States, at least. I'm not even sitting in the United States right now. I'm sitting in New Zealand, where I'm living half time. But I am a U.S. citizen. I'm Silicon Valley based. I still am a proud American, but I feel like America is going through something interesting. And I don't think it's just America. I think we're seeing it in other places around the world are going through similar kinds of things. But as an American, I see it more, clearly as an American because I see that perspective more. So I think democracy is still a good concept. I think we have to get back to it because I think we've moved away from it a little bit with the manipulation of democracy and people trying to not count certain votes where they don't feel like they're beneficial to themselves, et cetera. But a pure democratic approach, I think, would still be it's still the system I would love to live in.
Yeah, not just that on the electoral front, but like after the election, which is what matters, like election doesn't really matter if after the election we have a real-time system that can compile votes in real time about every single decisions and not having a clown just stream in a microphone their PR bullshit, like
Yeah.
if we would just make sound decisions all the time, that's what is winning about. It's making a good decision every time. And right now it's not operating on that system, although Elon is trying to bring something a bit more structure and entrepreneurial and less bureaucratic. I'm not sure if it will succeed. Let's see. Yeah, a couple of last questions. Do you believe in the concept of UBI, post AGI world?
Do I believe in the Say it again. Make sure I understand.
UBI, universal basic income, post AGI.
Yeah.
Do you believe that's a viable, scalable concept?
I remember I think it was Andrew Yang on the political front who had this concept of UBI. I am a believer in it. I do believe, when I was a little kid, my dad used to say to me, if you took all the money in the country or in the world and put it in one pile and divvied it out equally to everybody, very quickly you would have rich people and poor people. He said that's just the way of the nature of mankind. So I do believe that UBI is a good thing. I think everyone should have a certain level of basic needs met. I think our country has the blessed fortune to be able to afford something like that if it was done properly. So I do believe in it. I do think, again, if you embrace technologies like AI that are going to put certain jobs behind us and people out of those jobs, then you have to afford those people an opportunity to go reskill. Now, maybe part of UBI, maybe part of receiving that income is going through some form of education and reskilling so that you can better be a productive, contributing member of society. I'd have no problem with that. I have no absolute problem with somebody being given money from the government with a little bit of a kind of a condition to it, like you have to go do something. I don't have any issue with that approach. So I think UBI in a post-AGI world is not a bad thing. I think it can help with the ideas that I was talking about earlier around reskilling and keeping our population engaged and understanding how to use and leverage the technologies that are here and coming.
Or the mother currency, even better than Bitcoin, I think the value coin, right? Like the value that you add to society, you get paid by that, by an autonomous system. Without bias, I could see the world going through that. Obviously, there would be many options, including fiat, but I do envision a world
very merit-oriented, though, right? That's more of a
Yes.
meritocracy, right? Where you get, but that has some elements of fairness to it on its surface, but there are certain people who are disadvantaged in whatever way to be able to contribute in the same ways. What do you do with those people? What do you do with seniors who are at the end of their contributing years, so to say, to society?
I think by then we'd be able to fix
disabilities of some sort.
I think by then we'd be able to fix these things, and I think that's fully aligned with the laws of evolution. That value system. On the short term, I would sort of like take a percentage of that system and naturally allocate it to these people and their needs. And their happiness level, obviously that would be directly correlated. We would have like tracking device that would calculate if this or that makes them happy, which is I think we haven't figured out, right? Let's say a disabled person, most of them are struggling. They're sitting at their houses, and hopefully we'd have a bot to take care of these people and walk them around and tell them a story. That's a world we're getting in, but it's a tough question as well. Because
it all has to be sorted, right? Thankfully, there are people who are better skilled and knowledgeable than me to sort those things out. The one thing
more on the social side.
On the social side, absolutely. The one thing I have said about kind of the transgression of where the U.S. is right now from where it's been. I can still go start any business I want and do whatever I want in the U.S. Right? That freedom is still there, and that's a blessing to be able to say that. Right. Yes. And so for whatever your political views, good, bad, or indifferent about the current situation, you can still go do what you want for almost 100%. Maybe there's some small things you can't do, but honestly, it's close to 100%. You can you have the freedom and flexibility to go do what you want. And that, I think, should be continue to be embraced and continue to be supported. For those that need support and help, I like the idea of being able to lift all, you know, rising tide raises all ships, right? I like that idea in a country context.
Right. Jeff, thank you for being on today. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm always engaged on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me at siliconvalleyinyourpocket.com or Batchery, Batchery, like a batch of cookies, Batchery.com. These are our two startup programs that we work with founders. We work, you know, with founders around the world. So I would love to embrace any in your audience that have startups and are interested to get some support to take their innovations forward.